So we want a better symbolization of he won't confess, and more generally a way to symbolize negation. So let's look at a slightly different construction in English first. So there's the phrase, it is not the case that. So he will not confess basically means the same thing as it is not the case that he will confess. Basically say exactly the same thing. And it is not the case that he will confess, well, we could call that the negation of he will confess. So there's the sentence he will confess, and we stick the it is not the case that on the front, and we form a new sentence, the negation of the first sentence. And it is not the case that expresses negation in English. It says the sentence that I'm attached to is false. So it is not the case that he will confess. That says he will confess is false. And we can attach it is not the case that to any sentence, and we get a negation of the original sentence. So whatever sentence of English you pick, you could put it is not the case that on the front, and you would get a new sentence that says the first sentence is false. And you could stack them, right? So you could say, it is not the case that he will confess. And then you could say, no, it is not the case that it is not the case that he will confess. Or then you could form the sentence, it is not the case that 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 he will confess. Now, why would you ever say that? No good reason, but those would be perfectly grammatical sentences. They're just redundant relative to he will confess. At least some of them are. Okay, so in the logical language, we're going to, this symbol, which we call the tilde sometimes, this is going to be our it is not the case that sign. This means the same thing as it is not the case that. So suppose we say he will confess is symbolized by X. We say we need to pick a sentence letter for he will confess. Good, we'll pick X. X will be our symbolization of he will confess. So when we stick the tilde on the front, we get it is not the case that he will confess. So the grammar of this negation sign in logic and the grammar of it is not the case that are very similar. In both cases, you take a sentence and you put them on the front and you get a new sentence. And so this, and just like it is not the case that he will confess means basically the same thing as he won't confess, not X means the same thing as both of those. And we sometimes say, instead of saying, so that's how this basically works. So we call this symbol the negation sign, and we also call it the tilde. The tilde is, it's not quite accurate. So in some languages like Spanish, this symbol occurs on the top of some consonants like over N, and it means you get a ny sound. It's telling you how to pronounce the N. So here we've taken that symbol, and we're not putting it on top of letters, we're putting it on the side of letters. So we're just using it a little bit differently. And we call this thing, this symbol, so we put the tilde and then X, we say that that's the negation of X. And we might also just say not X. And for any sentence P, we can form not P, and we call that the negation of P. And what's the meaning of it? It's very simple. If P is false, then negation P is true. And if P is true, then negation P is false. That's it. That's all. That's what it means. Whatever the original sentence's truth value, if it just reverses the truth situation. If the original sentence is one way, then the negation is the other way. The original sentence is true. The negation of it is false. The original sentence is false. The negation of it is true. So that's pretty straightforward. So let's look at a symbolization example, how you might symbolize a double negation. Okay, so we have the sentence, it is not the case that he won't confess. So this whole thing, it's the negation of he won't confess. So we can replace the it is not the case that at the front with a tilde, with the negation sign, and we get tilde, he won't confess, right? We've just replaced the it is not the case that at the front with the negation sign. Now let's look at the remaining English. We have he won't confess. Well, that's the negation of he will confess. We don't have the it is not the case that out front. We have the not on the inside. It's more succinct, but it means the same thing. And so we can replace the nt, the not, with a tilde, and when we do, we get not. He will confess. Okay, good. Well, he will confess is symbolized by X, and so this whole thing becomes not X. And so we call these double negations because there are two negations on the front of some other sentence. We have two negations on the front of X, or two negations on the front of he will confess. And we call them both double negations. And we'll talk a little bit more about the logic of double negations in one of the next videos. Now, if you were feeling verbose, if you were feeling wordy, if you wanted to say what could be said in few words and a lot of words, like I just did, then you might say, well, look, you is a sentence in our logical language. It's a capital letter between P and Z. That means that not you is a sentence. Those don't mean the same thing, right? They mean opposite things. But also, not you is a sentence. And you and not you are close in meaning. Whenever one is true, so is the other. And whenever one is false, so is the other. They're always true. They always have the same truth value. But when we look just at the grammar, we think, well, you is a sentence, and we can stick a not, a negation sign, on front of any sentence we like, so we can stick a not on the front of you. But now since not you is a sentence, and we can stick the negation sign on the front of any sentence we like, not you is a sentence. But we can repeat this, right? Not you is a sentence, and we can stick the negation sign on the front of any sentence we like, so we can stick not on the front of not you, and what do we get? We get not you. So these are four different sentences. The first and the third say more or less the same thing, and the second and the fourth say more or less the same thing, and the first and the third are the opposite of the second and the fourth, but they're four different sentences, and they're all grammatical. Some are just longer than others. And you could repeat this for as long as you wanted. You could just write more and more and more and more squiggles on the front. And why would you do that? No good reason. But this points out just we want to be clear about the grammar of the not symbol. How does the not symbol work? You can put it on the front of any sentence you want. However big the sentence is, however complex the sentence is, you can put a squiggle on the front of it. You can even put a squiggle on the front of the conditional if P then Q, and you could say, is P enough for Q? No. We're going to talk about how to do that later. We're not going to talk about that right now. We'll talk about that in a few units, how you combine, how you deny a conditional. But right now, we're not going to be doing that. So, yeah, as in natural language, you would not say a triple negation, right? Just why? You just say the single negation. A shorter way of saying the same thing. So to summarize this video, we have this new symbol, the squiggle, and we call it the negation sign or the tilde. For any sentence P, we know that not P is another sentence, and we call it the negation of P. If the original sentence is false, then the negation of it is true, and if the original sentence is true, the negation of it is false. So in the next video, I'm going to talk about some inference rules that we can use with negation. And then in the last two videos, I'm going to be doing some examples. In one video, I'll do some symbolization examples with negation and the conditional. And in another video, I'll be doing some examples of derivations with negation and the conditional. So I'll get to those, and I'll see you there.